All right, so for this edition of Function Friday, we're going to be looking at DateTime and working with DateTime in Power Automate. And of course, this also applies to Power Apps. They use pretty much the same functionality. So let's take a look at our flow that we've got created here. So I set up this flow to walk through a number of DateTime functionalities, especially around the working with DateTime and formatting DateTime. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I just set up a demo flow here. So we're going to start off with what you might see as a typical DateTime value. So set up a variable with a DateTime of 1/05/2025. So first thing you need to understand when you're working with DateTimes in Power Automate and Power Apps is that it's very much dependent upon where you're running the flow at. So, if you look at that, if you're running on an environment where your default encoding is United States English, then this would be January 5th, 2025. Just about anywhere else in the world, that same date is actually May 1st, 2025, because most of the world, when you're using this format, this is the month, or sorry, this is the day, this is the month, and this is the year. In the US, we're oddballs, we do it backwards. So if your encoding is English US, then this is the month, this is the day, and this is the year. So if you're using this kind of DateTime format, and a lot of times you're working with bulk data, coming from files, spreadsheets, Excel, any of those number places, a lot of times you'll see dates in that format. So you need to understand, first of all, two things. What format the data that you're working with is in. Does this mean January 5th or does this mean May 1st? And then you also need to understand the encoding of the server where your flow is running, because those two things can have, obviously very large effects on what you're working with. A lot of times it can infer, based on that, but it doesn't always get it right. So you need to understand that and make sure that when you're working with it, that you're understanding what's coming in, what's going out. So the first thing we're going to do is just look at a standard formatting of the DateTime. Just plain format DateTime, throwing it out into a long date. So let's go ahead and run this. When it pulls up here, so we'll look at the default format of the DateTime. So, we had that 1/5/2025, and you see when it formats it coming out. Oh, sorry, that's not it. There's the output. So it's formatting it into ISO 8601, I believe is the encoding. That is the default formatting when it's coming out of the format DateTime function. So you see this, put the year first, then it'll have the month, and then the year, or the day. Then it'll be the T, and then a time coding. And if you're working with various date times, this obviously doesn't have the date, the time zone encoding, sorry. So it just assumes that it's going to be local time, wherever it's putting it out, where it's coming in. So that's the first one. So the next formatting we want to look at here is the short DateTime. Let me go back here to, the function. So if we look at the formatting of the DateTime function, so the format DateTime function has a couple of parameters that you can pass in. The very first parameter is the date that you're working with. So in this particular case, I'm passing in that string date variable that I created. And then the second one is the formatting. So by default, it gives you that ISO 8601 long form without the UTC or without the time zone encoding. In this, when I'm passing in the D parameter, small lowercase d, it will pass in or it will format in the short date format. So in this particular case, let's go ahead and run this another window just to make it easier to flip back and forth. Go ahead and run that. Back in edit mode. So if we look at the short date formatting, you can see the output is 1/5/2025. So that's the format date time in the short format coding. So what if we want to look at a full date? So this is kind of long format. So it's uppercase F is the formatting code. In this particular case, what we're going to get out is this output here. So it's putting in long format text, full text. So it's Sunday, January 5th, 2025, midnight. Okay. So there are a bunch of different format codes that you can pass in, and there is a web page that gives you the list of format codes, but they're pretty much the standard formatting, DateTime formatting codes that you have. And that is available in the documentation. So the next thing we want to look at here is a different kind of formatting. So let's say, what if we have the year first? And again, if you're doing, in the US encoding, this is going to be the month, this is going to be the day. The rest of the year, it's going to be opposite. The rest of the world is going to be the opposite. So if we want to do the format and the date, again, we're not passing in a formatting code, so it's going to give you the standard output. So let's look at that one. And again, you can see here this ISO 8601 formatting. And then if we want to do that in the short format, again, lowercase d is the formatting. And you can see the output here. It's understanding, what is the month, what's the day, and outputs it correctly. Now, if you want to make your life a lot easier, then you can pass it in the ISO 8601 format. That makes a lot of things easier if you're working with it, because you don't have to assume what format, which one's the month, which one's the day. Because in that default formatting, this is the month, this is the day, and you got the year, and you've got your time code and the hours. And if we look at the full date formatting, you can see it's putting it in, and here it's converting it to my local time. So if I pass it in here, it's just assuming that this is local date time, and it's outputting my local date time. So 1400 is 2 p.m. Then if I am defining a time or a time zone code, Z is obviously UTC, so that's Zulu. So if I output there, let's define the variable. Oh, converting time zone. So there it's converting it to my local. So Zulu time converted to my local is 9 a.m. So if it's 2 p.m., as you see here, 1400 Zulu, which is 2 p.m. and Zulu time, is 9 a.m. where I'm at and where my server runs. So my local time is Eastern Standard in the United States. So that's a little bit about the format datetime parameter, or the format datetime function. So the next thing we want to kind of look at is some adding and subtracting of dates. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add another step here. So let's add a compose action. And we're going to add a date. So we're going to do the function here. We're going to just start typing in add. So you can see, for adding and subtracting dates and times, there's a number of different functions you can do. You can add days, hours, minutes, seconds. You can add to time if you want to do it somewhat more flexibly. So say if we just want to add days, the first thing we want to do is pass in the date that we're adding to. In this particular case, we're going to pass in a variable. So we want to select our string date Zulu. And we're just going to add, 3 days. And add that to our function. So let's save that. And we'll go ahead and test. going to go ahead and look at our output here. So you can see that the input was 1/5, and we had 3 days, so the output is the 8th. Let's go ahead and back and edit that. Close that for now. And you can see that there are also subtract functions as well. Let me pull those up here just so you can see. There is a subtract from time. So say if you want to do a minus number of days and you just want to use the add days function, you can just do a negative value. So if I do add days and I want to pass in my Zulu time, then I can do -5 days. And we can add that. Go ahead and save and run it. Run after property is not valid. Oh, it's because it's the same name. You can't have more than one step that has the same name. So go ahead and test that. So again, our starting date was January 5th. If we look at the output here, you can see if I subtract 5 days, then it's December 31st. So subtraction is just, adding negative numbers to that. Very simple. If you want to get the current date time, that's very simple. There are a couple functions to do that. So if you want to get the current date, the easiest way to do it is just call UTC now. And that will give you the time in UTC format. So say you want to convert that to your local time zone. Then what you need to do is first you need to know what your local time zone is going to be. And then you can do convert from UTC. Pass in the UTC now. It's coming from. Then you want to pass in the date time, or the time zone you want to convert it to. Sorry. So something like that would give you the current time in your local time zone. If you want to convert between two different time zones, then you just do convert time zone. And you pass in the time, so it'll be UTC now. And then the source time zone. And then the destination time zone. Now, all that is a little clunky to work with, obviously, because you have to know the list of all the time zone names. You have to know what time zone you're converting to, what time zone you're converting from. But the functionality is in there to let you to work with those time zones and convert back and forth. But obviously, the easiest thing is just working with UTC now and storing everything as UTC wherever possible. That's generally the best practice anyway, is to always start, always save things in UTC format. All right, so what are some of the other things you can do with time zones? With the DateTime functionality. So one of the other functions you can work with is date difference. So if you want to find out what the difference is between two dates, so you can do the difference between your starting date and an ending date. Then you can just do that date difference function. Go ahead and run that. And if you look at the output here, so you can see, because one of them was stored at midnight, the other one was stored at 2 p.m., so the difference is 14 hours. Um, and this output here, when you get it out, will be generally in hours. In this case, it's 14 hours, minutes, seconds. So that's a basic overview of the functionality of working with dates and times in Power Automate and Power Apps. It's fairly straightforward. There's a lot of great stuff that you can do. I mean, it's just the biggest gotcha is making sure that you are remembering, what format the dates that you have as your inputs are, and as well as that as understanding the server where your what the encoding is of the server where you're running your flow. So or your Power App, so that it understands, it can read, tell the difference between month, day, year, or day, month, year kind of thing. I did mention there's a bunch of different short codes that you can use for the format date time, and there's a list of them in the documentation here, so you can see the different ones that are available to you. And it's pretty much the standard. If you've worked with it in other like .NET languages or things like that, then these formatting codes should be fairly straightforward and understandable. Should be familiar to you as well. And that example here is in this documentation on the Learn site. So that's it for this Function Friday, and I'll see you next time.